You're not stuck in reality. You're stuck observing the wrong one. Think about it for a second. Every morning you wake up, and within minutes your attention lands on the same worries, the same problems, the same version of your life that you've been trying to escape. And it's not because you're lazy or broken. It's because you don't realize what you're actually doing. You're collapsing the same timeline over and over again. There's a reason manifestation feels like pushing a boulder uphill. You're using your consciousness like a flashlight pointed at everything you don't want, wondering why it keeps showing up. The experiment that broke physics wide open proved something most people still don't understand. Your observation isn't neutral, it's creative. The moment you look at something, you give it form.
And if you keep looking at lack, struggle, and limitation, reality has no choice but to keep building that for you. So here's what we're doing in this video. I'm showing you how the observer effect works beyond the lab, how your identity is locking you into one frequency when infinite versions of your life already exist, and how to shift your observation so you stop collapsing the same old story. Before we go deeper, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next, because once you see how this works, you can't unsee it. There's an experiment that scientists have been running for over a century, and it still messes with their heads. It's called the double-slit experiment. Simple setup. You fire a single particle, an electron or a photon, toward a barrier with two slits. Common sense says the particle should go through one slit or the other, right?
Like throwing a marble at a fence with two holes. But that's not what happens. When no one's watching, when there's no measurement device observing which slit the particle goes through, it behaves like a wave. It goes through both slits at the same time and creates an interference pattern on the screen behind it. Multiple realities, multiple paths, all happening simultaneously. But the moment you put a detector there, the moment you observe which slit it goes through, the wave collapses. The particle picks one path, one reality, one outcome. It stops being a field of possibilities and becomes a single solid thing. Now here's where it gets unsettling. It's not the equipment doing this. It's the act of observation itself. Consciousness collapses the wave. Your attention forces the universe to choose. Think about that. A particle exists in all possible states until someone looks at it.
And then it decides. Physicists tried to explain this away for decades. They called it measurement disturbance, detector interference, anything to avoid the obvious implication. But the data kept coming back the same. The observer isn't separate from the experiment. The observer creates the outcome. And if that's true in a quantum lab, why would it be any different in your life? You're walking around every day thinking you're passively experiencing reality, but you're not. You're actively collapsing it. Every time you focus on a problem, every time you replay a fear, every time you check your bank account with that sinking feeling in your chest, you're observing. And observation isn't neutral. It's a choice. It's a vote. It's you telling the quantum field which version of reality to build for you. Most people don't get this because they think reality is solid, fixed, out there.
They look at their circumstances and say, this is just how it is. But quantum physics shows us something radically different. Before observation, particles exist as waves of probability, not in one place, but in all places, not in one state, but in all states. Physicists call this superposition. It's the idea that until something is measured, it exists in every possible configuration at once. Schrödinger's cat in the box, alive and dead simultaneously, until you open the lid and look. Your life works the same way. Right now, there's a version of you that's financially free. There's a version of you in the relationship you've been dreaming about. There's a version of you healthy, confident, living in a reality so different from this one, it would feel like a parallel universe. And it's not metaphor. According to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics,
Every possible outcome of every decision actually exists. Different timelines, different dimensions of experience, all layered on top of each other like radio frequencies. You're not choosing whether those realities exist. They already do. You're choosing which one you tune into, which one you observe, which one you collapse into form. And here's the kicker. You've been doing this your whole life without realizing it. You wake up, you look at your life, and you observe the same identity, same fears, same limits, same story. And because observation collapses possibility into reality, you keep getting the same results. It's not that you're attracting the same circumstances, you're collapsing the same timeline, over and over, like a broken record. But you're the needle. You're the observer. And the moment you shift what you're observing, everything changes. Let's go deeper into what's actually happening underneath the surface. Ancient teachings, long before quantum mechanics was even a concept, said that reality has layers. The Hermetic tradition, one of the oldest mystical schools, talked about 3 great planes of existence. The spiritual plane, the highest level, pure consciousness, infinite potential, the field where all possibilities exist simultaneously. Then the mental plane, the middle layer, where thought, imagination, and focus live. This is where consciousness starts shaping energy into form. And finally, the physical plane, the densest, slowest level of reality. This is what you see, touch, and experience with your 5 senses, the material world. The Kybalion, a text that breaks down these Hermetic principles, says something that sounds almost quantum.
As above, so below. As within, so without. Translation: what happens on the higher planes determines what shows up on the lower ones. The physical world isn't the source, it's the result. It's the echo, not the voice. Thought comes first. Consciousness comes first. Observation comes first. And only then does matter arrange itself to match. Modern physics is catching up to this. Quantum field theory says that particles aren't really particles. They're excitations in an underlying field, ripples in an ocean of energy. And that field responds to observation. Consciousness doesn't just witness reality, it participates in creating it. So when the Hermetic philosophers said the universe is mental, they weren't being poetic. They were describing how creation works. The mental plane shapes the physical plane. Your inner state determines your outer world. Not eventually, not sometimes, always. Now here's where most people get tripped up. They try to change the physical plane directly. They hustle harder, force more action, try to manipulate circumstances, and then wonder why it feels like they're swimming upstream. You can't change the reflection by touching the mirror. You can't rearrange the echo by yelling louder. You have to go to the source. And the source is consciousness. The source is observation. The source is you deciding on the mental plane what you're going to hold your attention on. Because here's the truth. Your attention is the most powerful tool you have. It's not passive. It's the instrument that collapses waves into particles, possibilities into experiences, the invisible into the visible. Where you place your attention, energy flows. Where energy flows, form follows. This isn't law of attraction fluff. This is physics. This is Hermetic law. This is how the universe operates. So the question isn't whether you're creating your reality. You are. The question is, are you doing it consciously or unconsciously? Are you observing from choice or from habit? Because most people are running on autopilot. They wake up and immediately observe the same identity they went to sleep with. Same doubts, same patterns, same frequency. And that frequency acts like a filter. It determines what you notice, what you expect, what you believe is possible. It determines which timeline you collapse. Your identity is a frequency, not in some abstract feel-good way, in a literal, measurable way. Neuroscience backs this up. Your brain operates on electrical impulses. Those impulses create brainwave patterns, delta,
theta, alpha, beta, gamma. Different states of consciousness produce different frequencies.
When you're stressed, anxious, or in survival mode, your brain is firing in high beta, fast, chaotic, fragmented. That's the frequency of lack, the frequency of needing, chasing, grasping. It's the frequency that says something's wrong and I have to fix it now. And when you're in that state, you're not a calm observer. You're a reactor. You're letting the physical plane yank you around like a puppet. Every circumstance triggers you. Every lack confirms your fear. Every problem feels like proof that reality is against you. But reality isn't against you. You're just observing from a distorted lens. You're looking through the filter of survival, and survival only sees threats. It can't see possibilities. It can't collapse abundance because it's not tuned to that frequency. Now contrast that with a calm, coherent state.
When you're in alpha or theta brainwaves, the kind you drop into during meditation or deep rest, your nervous system relaxes. Your thoughts slow down. You stop being hooked by every external trigger. And in that state, you become a conscious observer. You start seeing options you couldn't see before. Synchronicities increase. Doors open. People show up. Opportunities appear out of nowhere. Not because you forced them, because you shifted your frequency. You stopped collapsing the timeline of struggle and started collapsing the timeline of flow. Here's the paradox that trips people up. You can't force a frequency shift. The moment you try to control it, manipulate it, or fake it, you're back in survival mode. You're back in high beta, chasing, needing, grasping. The shift happens when you stop trying to change the outside and you start regulating the inside. When you stop letting circumstances define your state and you start choosing your state regardless of circumstances. This is what it means to be a conscious observer. You look at your life and you see what's there. You don't deny it. You don't pretend. But you also don't let it define you. You recognize it as one collapsed possibility, one snapshot, one frame in an infinite film. And then you choose. You choose what you're going to focus on. You choose what meaning you're going to assign. You choose what frequency you're going to hold. And slowly, sometimes suddenly, the external starts to shift. Because you're no longer feeding the old timeline with your attention. You're starving it, and you're feeding a new one. The one where you're already the person you want to become. The one where the problem is already solved. The one where reality bends toward you instead of away from you.
That's not visualization. That's not wishful thinking. That's conscious observation. That's you learning to use the same mechanism that collapses particles in a lab to collapse the version of your life that matches your true frequency. So how do you actually do this without falling back into old patterns? How do you stop being a passive observer reacting to every trigger and start being a conscious creator, collapsing the reality you actually want? It starts with regulation. You can't observe clearly when your nervous system is in chaos. You can't access higher timelines when your body thinks it's being chased by a predator. Survival mode shuts down the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for perspective, creativity, and choice. When you're dysregulated, you're not choosing, you're reacting, and reaction always collapses the familiar, the known.
The safe, even if the safe is miserable. So the first step is simple but non-negotiable. You have to calm your system. Breathwork, somatic practices, anything that signals to your body that it's safe. Because safety is the frequency where creation happens. Fear creates more fear. Calm creates space. And in that space, you can finally see clearly. You can finally choose consciously. You can finally observe without collapsing the same old story. Next, you have to clean your lens. Shadow work isn't optional if you want to shift timelines. Every unprocessed emotion, every repressed fear, Every wound you're avoiding acts like a distortion in your observation. You look at abundance, but you see through the lens of unworthiness. You look at love, but you see through the lens of abandonment. You look at success, but you see through the lens of past failure. And reality mirrors that.
Not because you're cursed, because observation creates. So you have to go in. You have to meet the parts of you that are still stuck in old timelines. The part that's still hurt, the part that's still afraid, the part that doesn't believe it's possible. And you don't shame those parts. You don't try to override them with forced positivity. You acknowledge them. You let them speak. You process the emotion. And as you do, the distortion clears. Your lens gets cleaner. And suddenly you can observe from a higher plane, from clarity, from wholeness, from the part of you that knows you're not the story. You're the consciousness observing the story. And consciousness can always choose a different channel. Here's where it gets practical. Most people live in a reactive loop.
Something happens. They react. They feel bad. They take action from that bad feeling, and they create more of what they don't want. Then they look at the result and say, "See, nothing works." But they're not seeing the loop. They're not seeing that they're the ones collapsing it. So the shift is this. You start responding instead of reacting. Something triggers you. Old pattern would be to immediately spiral, panic, or numb out. New pattern, you pause. You breathe. You notice the trigger. You say, okay, this is showing me where I'm still observing from fear. This is showing me where my lens is distorted. And instead of collapsing that timeline, you choose differently. You ask, what would the version of me who's already living the life I want do right now? How would they observe this situation? What meaning would they assign? And you step into that observation, not as pretending, as practice, as recalibration, as training your consciousness to collapse a different possibility. Because every time you respond instead of react, you're breaking the old pattern. You're weakening the old timeline. You're feeding a new frequency. And the more you do this, the more reality starts reflecting it back. People treat you differently. Opportunities show up differently. Problems resolve faster. Not because you got lucky, because you shifted what you were observing. You stopped collapsing struggle and started collapsing ease. There's a phrase that shows up in ancient texts. Seek first the kingdom, and all these things will be added unto you. For a long time, people thought that meant be religious and you'll get rewarded. But that's not what it's saying. The kingdom isn't a place. It's a state. It's a frequency.
It's the inner condition where you're no longer in survival, no longer in lack, no longer in fear. It's the state where you're aligned with the mental plane, with consciousness, with the field of infinite possibilities. And when you seek that first, when you prioritize your inner state over external circumstances, the external rearranges. It has to, because the outer is always a reflection of the inner. As within, so without. You can't hold a frequency of peace and collapse a reality of chaos. You can't hold a frequency of abundance and collapse a reality of lack. The two are incompatible. So when you seek the kingdom first, when you regulate your nervous system, clean your observation, and choose your state consciously, the physical plane catches up. It mirrors. It reflects. It collapses into form. And here's the part that sounds too good to be true, but is actually just physics. When you're in that aligned state, time bends. Things that used to take years happen in weeks. Doors that were locked suddenly open. People who could help you appear out of nowhere. Not because the universe is doing you a favor, because you're finally observing from the frequency where those things already exist. You're collapsing a different timeline, the one where you're not chasing, the one where reality is chasing you. Now let's talk about what happens when you actually start shifting, because it's not always comfortable. When you begin observing consciously, old timelines start dying, And death, even the death of something you don't want, can feel destabilizing. You might notice that people who used to be close start fading away, not because you pushed them out, but because they were part of the old frequency. They were characters in the old story.
And as you shift timelines, the cast changes. You might feel a sense of unreality, like your life doesn't quite fit anymore, like you're walking through a movie set that's being rebuilt around you. That's not a breakdown, that's a breakthrough. That's you noticing that you're no longer locked into the old collapsed reality. You might also experience what feels like tests. Old triggers resurface, old fears knock on the door, not to punish you, but to see if you're really done collapsing that timeline, to see if you're going to react the old way or respond the new way. And every time you choose the new way, you lock in the shift. You solidify the new frequency. You prove to the quantum field that you're serious, that you're not just dabbling, that you're actually becoming a different observer. And the field responds. It always does, because the field doesn't have opinions.
It doesn't judge. It just mirrors. It collapses whatever you consistently observe. So if you consistently observe lack, you get lack. If you consistently observe possibility, you get possibility. It's neutral. It's law. It's physics. Here's something most manifestation teachings miss. You don't need to know the how. You don't need to figure out the path. You don't need to map every step. Because the moment you try to control the how, you're back on the physical plane. You're back in the mind that only sees the visible spectrum, the tiny sliver of reality your senses can detect. But the mental plane, the plane of consciousness, sees the whole field. It sees every path, every possibility, every timeline that exists simultaneously. So your job isn't to plan the route. Your job is to hold the frequency, to stay in the state.
To keep observing from the version of you that already has what you want. And then reality, the physical plane, rearranges itself to match. Paths open that didn't exist before. People say yes who used to say no. Resources appear that weren't available yesterday. And you look back and think, how did that happen so fast? It happened because you stopped trying to force the mirror to change, and you finally shifted your face. You stopped trying to rearrange the echo, and you changed your voice. You became a different observer, and a different observer collapses a different reality. It's not magic, it's correspondence. As above, so below. As within, so without. Mental plane first, physical plane second, always. Let's ground this in something you can actually use today. 4 practices that shift you from reactive observer to conscious creator. First, stillness. 30 minutes of meditation every morning. Not to clear your mind completely, that's not the point. To train yourself to observe your thoughts without collapsing into them. To notice the space between thoughts. To remember that you're not the voice in your head, you're the awareness watching it. In that space, you stop being controlled by automatic patterns. You stop collapsing the same timeline by default. You start seeing that you have a choice. Second, nervous system regulation. Your body is the anchor. If your body is stuck in fight or flight, your consciousness is trapped in survival frequency. So you regulate. Cold showers, breath work, grounding exercises, somatic release, whatever brings you back into your body and signals safety. Because a calm body creates a clear mind, and a clear mind can observe without distortion. Third, shadow integration. Sit with what you've been avoiding. The fear you don't want to feel. The wound you keep covering up. The part of you that doesn't believe you deserve it. Write it out. Speak it out loud. Let it move through you instead of staying stuck. Because every emotion you avoid becomes a filter, and filters distort observation. Clean the filter, and you start seeing reality as it actually is. A field of infinite possibilities, not a prison of limitations. Fourth, conscious response. Every time something triggers you today, pause. Take 3 breaths. Ask yourself, am I about to collapse the old timeline or the new one? Am I reacting from fear or responding from choice? And then choose. Choose the response that matches the frequency of the life you're building, not as fake positivity, as conscious creation, as deliberate observation. Do that enough times, and the old timeline loses power.
The new one starts solidifying, and reality begins to reflect the shift. Here's the part that changes everything. You don't need permission. You don't need proof. You don't need circumstances to line up first. Because waiting for proof is just another way of saying, I'll observe differently once reality changes. But reality can't change until you observe differently. That's the loop. That's the trap. So you have to go first. You have to observe from the end. You have to hold the frequency of the version of you that already lives in the reality you want. Not someday, today, right now, in this moment. And yes, the physical plane might still show the old story. Your bank account might still show lack. Your relationship status might still show single. Your body might still show the old condition. But those are lagging indicators. They're the echo of your past observation.
They're the collapsed wave from yesterday's frequency. And if you keep observing them as truth, as proof, as the final word, you keep collapsing the same timeline. But if you see them as temporary, as one possibility among infinite possibilities, as the old reality that's already dissolving, and you hold your attention on the new frequency anyway, the shift happens, sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly, but it happens, because observation creates, and you're learning to observe like a master, like someone who knows that the mirror follows the face, like someone who knows that the quantum field has no choice but to reflect what you consistently hold in consciousness. You're not hoping anymore. You're not wishing. You're collapsing, deliberately, consciously, powerfully. One more thing before we close this out. You're going to notice signs that the shift is happening.
Synchronicities are the first one. You think of someone and they text you. You need information and it shows up in a random conversation. You wonder about something and the answer appears on a billboard. These aren't coincidences, they're confirmations. They're the quantum field winking at you, saying, yeah, you're tuning in to a different channel now. Second sign, old relationships and situations fall away without drama. You don't have to cut people off or force endings. They just naturally fade, because they're not a vibrational match anymore. They belong to the old timeline, and as you shift, the cast changes. Third sign, you feel a strange sense of unfamiliarity with your own life, like you're watching yourself from the outside, like this isn't quite the same movie you were in last month. That's not dissociation. That's you noticing that you've jumped timelines.
You're collapsing a different reality, and your consciousness is catching up to it. Fourth sign, things start happening faster. Manifestations that used to take months happen in days. Problems that used to feel impossible resolve with ease. Not because you're working harder, because you're finally observing from alignment, from the frequency where those outcomes already exist. And all you had to do was stop collapsing the old one and start collapsing the new one. That's it. That's the whole game. Observe consciously, hold the frequency, let the quantum field do what it does. Collapse the wave, build the reality, reflect the inner state. You're not a victim of circumstances. You're the observer collapsing them into form. And once you really get that, not just intellectually, but in your bones, your whole life becomes a laboratory. Every moment becomes a choice. Every thought becomes a vote. Every observation becomes creation.
And you stop asking, why isn't this working? And you start asking, which timeline am I collapsing right now? Because that's the only question that matters. So here's what you do today, right now. You sit down, you close your eyes, and you observe yourself from a higher plane, not as the person stuck in circumstances, as the consciousness choosing which possibility to collapse. You regulate your body, you clean your lens, you choose your state, and you hold it. Not for 5 minutes, not until something goes wrong. You hold it like your life depends on it, because it does. Your life, your reality, your timeline, it's all collapsing based on what you observe. So observe the version of you that's already free, already abundant, already living in the reality you've been chasing.
Observe it so clearly, so consistently, so completely, that the quantum field has no choice but to build it. And then watch what happens. Watch how the external starts bending. Watch how doors open. Watch how people show up. Watch how the impossible becomes inevitable. Not because you forced it, because you finally became the observer who collapses that timeline. You stopped waiting for reality to give you permission, and you gave yourself permission to observe differently. And that's all it ever takes. Conscious observation, steady frequency, unwavering focus. The rest is just physics. The rest is just the field responding to the observer. And you're the observer. You've always been the observer. You just forgot. But now you remember. And once you remember, you can't collapse the old timeline the same way ever again. Because you've seen behind the curtain. You've seen how it works.
You've seen that you're not stuck. You're just observing the same channel. And the moment you change the channel, everything changes. So change it. Today. Now. This moment. Observe the life you want like it already exists. Because in the quantum field, it does. And your observation is the only thing standing between possibility and reality. So observe wisely. Observe consciously. Observe like the creator you are. Because that's what you are. That's what you've always been. And the moment you own that, the whole game changes. If you made it this far, comment Conscious Observer so I know you're catching this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now so you don't miss the next one. Because here's the thing nobody talks about. There's a shadow side to timeline jumping that can trap you if you're not aware. I'll break that down in the next video that pops up on your screen.
Also, follow me on Instagram for daily insights and check out the links in the description to support the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.